When I return to my ship, I am going to recommend to the High Council that we upgrade our formal diplomatic relationship with your people. He paused. I am also going to recommend that no one ever make them angry. Overton smiled. That's probably wise. I am also, Vorik added, with the measured dignity of a general acknowledging a defeat that had been entirely bloodless and therefore somehow more complete, going to note in my personal log that your armor defeated me in under 4 seconds and that I consider this the most educational experience of my 43-year military career. Overton looked at him. Then he laughed, an actual full human laugh, loud and warm, and it echoed off the buildings of Fort Cadence and scattered into the evening air like something alive. I'll tell the armor you said that, he said. It'll be delighted. Vorik walked inside. On the table in his quarters there was another cup of coffee. He drank it standing up, looking out the window at a planet full of soft, stubborn, absolutely relentless creatures who had, in the span of 24 hours, made him rethink everything he thought he knew about the relationship between physical capability and the will to use it. The coffee was perfect. He was going to have to ask about the supply chain before he left. For diplomatic purposes, obviously. General Vorik Tessane had seen 43 wars. Not small skirmishes either, not border disputes between two bickering colonies fighting over a gas cloud. Real wars. The kind where entire moons go quiet afterward, the kind where star maps get redrawn because the old ones have too many sad memories attached to them. He had personally commanded fleets that stretched so wide across space they blotted out stars from certain angles, and he had done it all with the calm, unhurried confidence of a being who had simply never lost. So when his intelligence officer, a young Vishari named Polo Drin, placed a data tablet on his command desk and said, "Sir, we may have a slight problem," Vorik did not panic. He did not even look up from the star chart he was reviewing. He simply raised one of his 4 eye stalks in the universal gesture that meant, "Go ahead, ruin my morning." "The humans," Polo said. Vorik put down his chart. See, that was the thing about humans. Nobody ever finished that sentence with good news. It was never, "The humans brought snacks." It was never, "The humans sent a polite message and then waited patiently for a reply." No, the humans always required their own sentence, their own pause, their own little moment of silence where everyone in the room quietly reconsidered their life choices. "What have they done now?" Vorik asked. "Well," Polo began, pulling up a holographic display with the nervous energy of someone about to show their commanding officer a very bad report card. "You know how we sent the 3rd observation carrier to monitor their Northern Hemisphere military exercises?" "Yes, and you know how we told Captain Breve Olin to maintain a distance of at least 200,000 kilometers to avoid detection?" "Yes, he maintained 187,000 kilometers. He was 13,000 short." Vorik stared at him. And they detected us anyway, within 6 minutes. Polo tapped the display. "Then they locked targeting systems on our ship. Then they broadcast a message on our frequency, which they should not have known, asking if we needed help finding parking." The room went very, very quiet. "Parking," Vorik repeated. "Yes, sir. Parking, like we were a vehicle that had pulled into the wrong spot." Vorik stood up slowly. He was tall, even by Vishari standards, with a frame that had survived multiple combat wounds and rebuilt itself into something that looked less like a body and more like a warning. He walked to the viewport of his command ship, the Relentless Claim, and looked out at the dark between stars. Somewhere out there, spinning lazily around a yellow sun, was a small wet planet full of soft, fragile, short-lived creatures who had just asked his warship if it needed help finding parking. "Get me the full intelligence file," he said. "Everything we have on them." Polo placed another tablet on the desk. It was thick. Vorik flipped through it. He read for a long time. He did not speak. His junior officers watched him read with the expressions of people waiting for a doctor to deliver test results, and not the good kind. The file covered approximately 200 years of human activity. It covered their wars, their weapons, their medicine, their engineering, their completely baffling habit of doing things for fun that other species only did when forced to by terrible circumstances. There was a whole section on something called extreme sports that Vorik had to read 3 times because he kept assuming the translation was wrong. Humans apparently would strap thin pieces of material to their feet and hurl themselves down frozen mountains at speeds that would kill most species. And they would do this voluntarily, and they would pay money for the privilege, and they would do it again the following weekend. He turned to the section on their military. He read it very carefully. Then he closed the file, set it down, and said, "I want to go to their planet." Every eye stalk in the room swiveled toward him. "Sir," said Commander Axa Pelworth, his second in command. She was Vishari, like him, but had spent enough time around diplomatic missions to have developed the reflex of questioning decisions before they got anyone killed. It was a quality Vorok usually appreciated. Not to fight, he said quickly because he could see Axa's hand moving toward the alert panel. As a diplomatic visit, officially sanctioned, I want to see them in person. I want to see their military. Why? Vorok tapped the file. Because according to this, their soldiers carry into combat an average of 32 kilograms of equipment. Armor, weapons, supplies, communications, everything. 32 kilograms on their bodies while running. Axa blinked all 6 of her eyes. That is not possible. That is what the file says. Our combat exosuits weigh 20 kilograms and we mount them on powered frames. I know. The Draveri use mechanical assistance for anything over 8 kilograms. I know. The humans just carry it with their bodies, their soft, unarmored, non-augmented bodies. According to every source we have, Vorok said. Yes. And then they run obstacle courses in it, for training. And some of them apparently do it for fun. There it was again, that word, fun. Axa looked at the file, then she looked at her commanding general, then she made the face she always made when she wanted to say something and was trying to decide if it was worth the career risk. Sir, she said finally, I think the humans might be a little bit insane. That, said Vorok, is exactly why I want to meet them. The diplomatic visit was arranged with surprising speed. The humans, to their credit, did not make it complicated. A representative named Colonel Mace Overton responded to their formal request within 4 hours, confirmed the visit, sent coordinates, and then added at the end of the message, looking forward to it, we'll put on coffee. Nobody in the Veshari diplomatic corps knew what coffee was. The AI translation system rendered it as a hot stimulant liquid consumed before and during stressful events, which, honestly, only made Vorok more curious. They landed at a human military installation called Fort Cadence, somewhere in a region of the planet that was aggressively green and smelled, according to the biosensors, of grass, engine oil, and something the translation system could only describe as optimism. The landing pad was clean. The humans waiting on it were standing in straight lines. They were, to the eye of an alien general who had reviewed military forces across 14 star systems, impressively well organized for creatures with no exoskeletons, no natural weapons, and a lifespan that most Veshari considered frankly depressing. Colonel Mace Overton stepped forward first. He was shorter than Vorok had expected. Most Veshari stood at nearly 2.5 meters. Overton was perhaps 1.5. He had a flat face, 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs, and the kind of expression that said he had shaken hands with alien generals before and was not going to embarrass himself by making it weird. He extended his right hand in the human greeting gesture. Vorok had been briefed on this. He extended his own right limb. They clasped. Overton's grip was firm. Vorok noted with some surprise that it was genuinely firm, not courtesy firm, not I am trying to seem tough firm, but the grip of a creature whose hands were accustomed to holding things that resisted being held. General Tussain, Overton said, welcome to Fort Cadence. Colonel Overton, Vorok replied through his translator, thank you for having us. Of course. I understand you wanted to see how we train. I did. I hope that is not an imposition. Overton smiled. It was, Vorok had been told, a friendly gesture. It showed teeth, which in most species was a threat display, but in humans apparently meant the opposite, which seemed like the sort of evolutionary joke the universe told just to keep things interesting. Not at all, Overton said. Actually, the troops have been looking forward to it. They've never been watched by an alien general before. Some of them have been showing off. Vorok looked at the soldiers standing behind Overton. They were young, most of them, some were very young. They were all wearing the same dark-colored uniform, and they were all standing with the particular stillness of people who had been told to stand still and were trying very hard to do it correctly. One of them had a bruise on his jaw that suggested he had recently lost an argument with something solid. Another had, inexplicably, a small drawing of a cartoon creature on the back of his hand. These, Vorok thought, are the beings who asked my warship if it needed help finding parking. I would like to see your equipment, Vorok said. Overton nodded. Absolutely, we've set up a display, but first, he gestured toward a low building nearby. Coffee? Vorok decided that refusing coffee from a human soldier was probably not the diplomatic move. Yes, he said, thank you. The coffee was dark and it was hot and it smelled like something between rich soil and a minor threat. Vorok's biosensors flagged it as containing a stimulant compound. His junior officers declined. Vorok took a cup, looked at it, and drank. It was, he thought, actually excellent. He did not say this. He maintained the expression of a general reviewing foreign customs with polite neutrality, but he noted it. The equipment display was set up in a large open hall, laid out on long tables where the tools of human ground combat organized neatly with small labels identifying each item. Overton walked with him along the tables and explained each piece, and Vorik listened and his translator worked. And somewhere around the fifth table, Vorik stopped walking. He was standing in front of the armor. It was heavier than it looked. He knew this before he touched it because he could see it in the way the table was supporting it, in the thickness of the plating, in the sheer density of the layered materials. It was designed to cover a human completely. Helmet, chest plate, back plate, shoulder guards, arm guards, leg guards, boots, everything connected and fitted and sealed. It had no power source. It had no mechanical assistance. It was simply material shaped and hardened and worn by a human body over a human body, and then that human body was expected to function in it. Vorik looked at Overton. "May I?" he asked, gesturing at the armor. Overton raised an eyebrow. "You want to try it on?" "I want to understand it." Overton looked at him. Then he looked at the armor. Then he looked back at Vorik with the expression of someone doing very rapid mental mathematics. It, he said carefully, "was not designed for your physiology, General. I understand that. I still want to try." There was a pause. "Right," said Overton. "Sure, why not?" It took 4 soldiers and 20 minutes to figure out how to get the armor onto Vorik's frame. It did not fit. It was not designed to fit. Vorik's limbs were longer, his torso broader, his joints oriented differently. What should have been a smooth process of buckling and securing became a collaborative engineering problem involving creative reattachment of straps and one soldier who kept holding pieces in place with both hands and the expression of someone trying not to laugh. When they finished, Vorik stood upright. He lasted approximately 3 seconds. The weight hit him not all at once, but in a series of realizations. First, his legs, which were accustomed to Vishari physiology, told him politely that this was unusual. Then his core stabilizers, the muscles running the length of his torso, reconsidered their career choices. Then the whole assembled weight of 32 kilograms of unsupported, unpowered human combat armor made its opinion known, and Vorik, General Vorik Tissain, veteran of 43 wars, commander of the Relentless Claim, sat down heavily on the floor of Fort Cadence's equipment hall. Nobody laughed. To their considerable credit, not a single soldier in that room laughed. One of them made a sound that was technically a cough. Overton crouched down next to Vorik with the expression of a man who was being extremely professional. "You all right, General?" Vorik looked up at him. Then he looked at the armor currently distributed across his body and the floor around him. Then he looked at the soldiers standing very carefully still with very controlled expressions. "You're soldiers," Vorik said. "Wear this, voluntarily." "Yes, sir." "And then they run." "Yes, sir." "In it." "Yes, sir." "While carrying weapons, and rations, and water, and communications equipment." Overton paused. "Sometimes also a teammate if that teammate is injured." Vorik sat on the floor of Fort Cadence and stared at Colonel Mace Overton. "General," Overton said gently, "would you like some more coffee?" Vorik, for the first time in 43 wars, had no response. The answer, obviously, was yes. Vorik slept poorly that night. Not because the quarters at Fort Cadence were uncomfortable. The humans had, with genuinely thoughtful effort, prepared a room large enough for his frame, with a sleeping platform reinforced to handle his weight, and a temperature setting that matched the climate data they had apparently researched in advance. They had even placed a small container of coffee on the table beside the platform, which Vorik found either extremely considerate or mildly alarming depending on how he thought about it. No, he slept poorly because he kept thinking about the armor. He had tried to lift it off the floor after the incident. Properly this time, with both primary limbs and his full attention and the quiet, stubborn dignity of a general who refused to be defeated twice by the same object in the same afternoon. He had managed to get it upright. He had managed to hold it for approximately 40 seconds before setting it back down with the controlled care of someone pretending they had chosen to put it down rather than been forced to. The armor weighed 32 kilograms. His own combat exosuit, the powered frame he wore on the bridge during battle situations, weighed 19 kilograms and had 4 independent motor assists built into the joints. Without the motor assists, Vorik could wear it for perhaps 10 minutes before his muscles began to formally complain. Human soldiers wore 32 kilograms of unpowered material strapped directly to their bodies and then went to work. Actual work. Running, climbing, carrying additional equipment, occasionally carrying each other, apparently for hours at a stretch, in conditions ranging from extreme cold to extreme heat to extreme wet to extreme everything, because humans, Vorik had learned from the intelligence file, had somehow managed to build military forces that operated in every possible environment their planet offered. And their planet, it turned out, offered quite a lot of terrible environments with great enthusiasm. He drank the coffee at 3 in the morning by Fort Cadence's local clock. It was still excellent. He made a note to ask Overton about the supply chain. Breakfast was served in the base mess hall, which was a large, loud, practical room that smelled of cooked food and the particular brand of early morning energy that young soldiers project when they have been awake since before dawn and are trying not to show how much they resent it. Vorok entered with Polo and Axa, and every human in the room turned to look at them with the unified expression of people who had been told aliens were visiting and had not entirely believed it until this moment. There was a beat of silence. Then a young soldier at the back of the room said, very quietly but not quietly enough, "They're huge." His neighbor elbowed him. Overton was already seated at a table near the front. He stood when Vorok approached, gestured to the chairs that had been replaced with a reinforced bench sized for Vishari frames, and said, "Morning, General. Sleep well?" "Adequately," Vorok said, which was the diplomatic version of "not remotely." "Good, eat something. We've got a full day planned." Overton pushed a tray toward him. On it were several items that the bioscanner on Vorok's wrist confirmed were safe for Vishari consumption. The humans had checked. They had actually checked in advance which foods would not cause problems for alien biology, and had prepared accordingly. Vorok found this either impressive or unsettling, and then decided it was both, and that both was probably the correct way to feel about humans in general. "What is the schedule?" Vorok asked. Overton picked up his own coffee cup. "Morning, we watch the 3rd Battalion run their standard fitness assessment. Afternoon, combat training demonstration. Then, if you're interested, we've got something special for evening." "Special," Vorok repeated, with the tone of a general who had learned that human words like special and interesting and "you might want to see this" generally preceded events that required updating intelligence files. "Special," Overton confirmed, smiling that tooth-showing smile. The fitness assessment was held on a long track that wound through the outer grounds of Fort Cadence in a route that included, by Vorok's count, 4 significant elevation changes, 2 water obstacles, and a section that passed directly through what the soldiers cheerfully called the mud pit, which was exactly what it sounded like and was not, to anyone's knowledge, required to be quite as large as it was. The 3rd Battalion assembled on the track in the gray early light, wearing their training gear, which was lighter than combat armor but still included weighted vests that Vorok's bioscanner estimated at approximately 15 kilograms each. A human officer with a voice that could have been used as a foghorn called out instructions. The soldiers listened. Then they ran. They ran for a very long time. Polo stood next to Vorok and watched with the expression of someone recalculating something important. "How long have they been running?" he asked after a while. Vorok checked his timepiece. 41 minutes. "And they started at that pace?" "Yes. And they have not slowed down?" "No." Polo was quiet. Then he said, "Our standard combat fitness assessment is a 12-minute sustained movement exercise. I am aware. 12 minutes. And 3 soldiers failed at last rotation. I am also aware of that." "These soldiers," Polo said, watching a group of humans splash through the mud pit with the resigned efficiency of people for whom this was simply Tuesday, "have been running for 41 minutes, with weight, and none of them have stopped." "One of them is singing," Axa noted from Vorok's other side. They all looked. She was right. Somewhere in the middle of the pack a soldier was singing. It was rhythmic, low, the kind of song designed to keep feet moving rather than to demonstrate musical ability, and it was being picked up by the soldiers around him in the particular way that group rhythms spread when people are suffering together and have decided to make the suffering slightly more bearable by doing it in unison. Vorok stood very still and watched them and said nothing for a long time. "Sir," Axa said quietly, "I want to revise my earlier assessment." "Which one?" "The one where I said they might be a little bit insane." "To what would you revise it?" Axa thought about it. "I think they might be a lot insane, and I think that might be the only reason any of this works." Vorok considered this. He was privately beginning to agree. The afternoon demonstration was held on a large training ground that had been cleared and marked with colored flags indicating different exercise stations. Overton had arranged for a full squad to demonstrate combat techniques, and the squad arrived in full gear, which meant the 32 kilograms, plus weapons, plus additional equipment, moving with the coordinated ease of people who had done this so many times that the weight had stopped registering as a variable and had simply become part of their body. They moved through scenarios. Room clearing, they called it, which was the systematic and rather aggressive process of entering a space and making it safe, and they did it with a speed and precision that Vorik found difficult to track even with his trained eye. Then obstacle navigation, then casualty extraction, which was the process of removing an injured soldier from a dangerous area, and which required one soldier to carry another soldier plus both sets of equipment across a course that included things no sensible being would choose to climb. Vorik watched a female soldier named Sergeant Bex Yarrow carry a male soldier who was easily a third larger than her across a wooden wall obstacle, and he turned to Overton and said, "Is that typical?" "Pretty much," Overton said. "She is carrying a person. She is carrying Corporal Finch, yes. Finch weighs about 90 kilograms, plus gear, while wearing her own gear. That is how casualty extraction works, yes." Vorik looked at Sergeant Yarrow, who had cleared the wall and was now moving at a pace that could generously be called rapid across uneven ground with a person over her shoulders, and he updated the intelligence file in his head in real time, adding several notes that began with phrases like "do not underestimate based on size," and "the concept of a weight limit may not apply." "You know," Overton said beside him in the casual tone of someone sharing a mildly interesting detail, "this is our standard demonstration. We put this together specifically because it is accessible for visitors. Good overview of basics." Vorik turned to look at him. "This is your basic demonstration?" "Yes, sir." "Not your advanced one?" "No, sir. The advanced one involves different equipment and some environments we did not think would be appropriate for a first visit." "What kind of environments?" Overton's expression did something that was technically still a smile but had acquired a quality that Vorik's pattern recognition flagged as "there is more information here than is being shared." "Well," Overton said, "we have a cold weather training facility about 300 kilometers north, and a desert training facility south, and a jungle training environment east. Our soldiers rotate through all of them." "How cold is the cold facility?" -40 on a mild day. Vorik stared at him. "They train in -40 degrees, Vorik said. "They train in it, sleep in it, eat in it. 3 weeks per rotation." "And the desert?" 50+ degrees, high humidity variant and low humidity variant, because different desert environments require different adaptations. "And the jungle?" Overton just nodded. "And your soldiers do all of these?" "Every soldier certified for global operations completes all 3 environments, yes, most of them twice." Vorik stood quietly for a moment. The intelligence file had mentioned environmental training. He had read it. He had processed it. It had not fully landed until this moment, watching Sergeant Yarrow set Corporal Finch down, dust herself off, and then turn around to see if anyone else needed carrying, because apparently she was not done yet and the obstacle course was not going to clear itself. "Colonel Overton," Vorik said, "I would like to ask you something directly, and I would like a direct answer." "Of course," Overton said. "During today's demonstration, were your soldiers performing at full capacity?" Overton was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then he said, "No, sir." "How much were they holding back?" Another pause. Overton looked out at the training ground. He had the expression of someone deciding how honest to be and then deciding to be very honest. "The fitness standards you saw this morning are our baseline requirements. Soldiers who meet only baseline do not get deployed on primary operations. The soldiers you watched today are mid-tier performers, which means they're significantly above baseline but below our top-tier certified units. And your top-tier units are doing things," Overton said carefully, "that we don't demonstrate to visitors until we know them a bit better." Vorik processed this information with the steady calm of a general who had trained himself never to show exactly how much something had surprised him. He was, underneath the calm, quite surprised. "I see," he said. "We didn't want to be rude," Overton added helpfully. "By showing us your best, by making the visit more intense than was comfortable. You came for diplomacy. We wanted diplomacy to be the point." He paused. "We can always schedule a follow-up." That evening, Overton made good on his promise of something special. They drove in a large vehicle to a section of the base that sat away from the main buildings, where a low structure housed what Overton called a simulation environment, which turned out to be a training space equipped with technology that Vorik's intelligence officers had not known existed and were now quietly taking notes on with the focused energy of people who understood this was important. Inside the simulation environment, 4 soldiers in full gear were running a scenario. The scenario was projected on screens around the walls, showing terrain, showing targets, showing variables that changed in real time as a human instructor adjusted conditions from a control station. The soldiers moved through it with a speed and coordination that was Vorik thought, genuinely beautiful in the way that any perfect system is beautiful, the way a well-designed engine is beautiful, not because it is soft but because every part of it does exactly what it is supposed to do with no waste and no hesitation. One of the soldiers was navigating a section of the scenario that required him to carry a piece of equipment weighing by the display's numbers 48 kilograms, while moving through simulated uneven ground while communicating with his squad, while tracking 3 separate targets. He was doing all of this simultaneously. He was not struggling. He was, to all observable evidence, fine. Polo had stopped taking notes. He was just watching. "General," he said quietly. "Yes," Vorik said. "The file. Yes. It said they were dangerous. It did. I think," Polo said in the voice of someone arriving at a conclusion that had been building for approximately 24 hours, "that the file understated it." Vorik watched the soldier with the 48-kilogram load execute a turn that should not have been physically possible given the weight distribution, and then move forward without breaking stride, and then, with no apparent effort, help a second soldier clear a barrier one-handed while maintaining the load with the other. "Paulo," Vorik said. "Sir, get me a full update prepared for the High Council by morning. New classification tier. Revise the threat assessment for this sector. And note specifically that what we were shown today was," he paused, choosing the words carefully, "the version they prepared for polite company." Polo wrote this down. Later, walking back to the quarters block under a sky that was doing something extraordinary with color as the local sun finished setting, Overton walked beside Vorik in the comfortable silence of 2 military minds who had spent a day looking at each other's world and had each come away with a great deal to think about. "May I ask you something?" Vorik said. "Sure," said Overton. "Your soldiers, the weight, the environments, the endurance. How do they do it? What is the mechanism? Is it conditioning alone, or is there a biological factor we have not accounted for?" Overton thought about this with the genuine consideration of someone who had never been asked to explain something they had always simply accepted as true. "Honestly," he said, "I don't think there's one mechanism. It's a lot of things together. Conditioning, yes. The right training over time builds the body up in ways that don't happen any other way. But also," he paused, "I think part of it is that humans are just stubborn. Stubborn. We don't really have a good off switch for effort. Most species, I understand, have fairly reliable signals that tell them when to stop. Pain, fatigue, the body communicating at some point that enough is enough." He shrugged. "Humans hear that signal, we just also hear another signal underneath it that says keep going anyway, and most of us, especially the ones who end up in military service, listen to the second signal." Vorik considered this for a long time. "That," he said finally, "is either very brave or very dangerous." "In our experience," Overton said pleasantly, "it tends to be both." They reached the quarters block. Overton held the door open and Vorik paused in the doorway looking back at the base around them, the lights coming on in windows, the distant sound of soldiers calling to each other across the evening, the low hum of a world that was, in its own particular way, always ready. "Colonel," Vorik said. "General?"